Hi everyone, Jessica here from Paper Ink Stamp and welcome back to another card making video. So today we're not actually going to be making cards, we're going to be making a whole bunch of backgrounds. So I've picked up a load of stencils, I have got some jasmine white texture paste, and I've got my spatula by Nuvo. And what we're going to do is create several backgrounds. I'm only going to show you a handful of them, but at the end I will show you all of the backgrounds that I did make. So I wanted to put together some backgrounds just so I've got them there ready to go if I want to create a card. And I wanted to use up some of this Eyes Ink 3D texture paste. I've had this for a while now and I haven't really used it too much. And I wanted to kind of use up what I've got. And I'm going to be trying to colour this. I'm going to use a couple of my ink pads. So the first thing I'm going to do is, I've got my stencil, but I want to make sure that it's sticky. So I'm going to take some temporary stencil adhesive. So you do see other products, things like pixie spray, but I'm using this by Pinflair. So you can see this is a temporary stencil glue. I usually use this to restick my scan and cut mat, but I am going to be using it on the stencils, and I kind of forget that this is what it's for, and I forget just how good it works and how much easier it makes actually using stencils. So all I've got here is just a makeup sponge. I've dabbed a little bit of that glue onto the sponge. I don't need too much, and you can see that I'm literally dabbing it onto the back of the stencil. And this means then that it's going to temporarily stick to my cardstock. You will be able to just peel it up slightly because obviously we're not doing a permanent adhesion here. We just want it to stay in its place so we get that full design exactly how it should be and nothing kind of gets underneath that. So once we've done that, we're going to use a couple of ink pads, like I said, and we're going to mix that with this texture paste to give it some colour. So I've got a couple of these Distress ink cubes here, so you can see that I've smushed some of that colour onto my glass mat. So I'm using the white part so I can see exactly where the ink is. And then I'm going to just scoop out some of this texture paste. So the thing that I sort of realised as I was going through this process, just having a play, is it wasn't really taking on the colour like I thought it would. And I think this is down to the fact that this texture paste is white, so I'm assuming that there's something in it that's going to keep it white. It's not like the Tim Holtz texture paste that they do, so I have ordered some of that. We're going to give it a go because I do end up using all of the texture paste that's in this pot, but I think it's not taking on that vibrant colour because it is coloured white. Hopefully that makes sense. But all I'm doing is just adding more colour onto that glass mat, and then I'm dragging it into the texture paste. So there's a lot like mixing, maybe if you're making butter icing for a cake, adding some food colouring into it to, of course, get your desired colour. But when I'm happy with the colour, and the main thing that I'm going for here is to make sure that it's all mixed in really nicely. So I'm just kind of going back and forth along that glass mat, making sure that it's all mixed in and I don't have any sections that's just pure colour. So once all the colour is mixed through, then I'm just going to put this through the stencil in the exact same way you would normally with any kind of texture paste, if it's the Nuvo embellishment mousse, anything like that, exactly the same. So I want to make sure I get a nice even coating and scraping off any of the excess on the top, and that'll just mean that it'll help dry quicker. So that first colour that I mixed in, that was the evergreen bough, and now I'm coming in with some peacock feathers. I wanted to try and give myself a gradient look. So what I'm doing is I've taken more of the texture paste, mixed it in with that peacock's feathers, and then I'm just dragging in any remaining texture paste that I had on this glass mat with that evergreen bough. So it's just going to kind of mix those two colours together, but it's going to give me a much lighter colour. You won't necessarily be able to see this gradient on camera, but in real life you can definitely see that it goes from dark to light, and in a really, really beautiful way. And I think this is just makes such a subtle kind of background. It's almost like a duck egg type of colour. It's not quite the colours of the inks, again, because I think it's mixing in with that white texture paste. So of course then it's just showing it as a different colour. But when you peel off that stencil, you can see just how easy that lifted up. And you can see that really beautiful background. You've got some texture in there, of course, then you've got the depth as well, but hopefully you can just see that gradient effect, and I've kind of gone over that top colour a little bit just to help kind of blend those two together. So the next one we're going to do, the exact same process, this time I'm mixing it in with some mustard seed. Again, this is one of those mini Distress ink cubes, and I'm just doing the same thing again. This is then going to turn into kind of a a really buttery, kind of a light buttery colour. Again, not that really deep mustard seed colour that you would see. But what I wanted to do on this stencil is I wanted to create lines of two different colours. So I'm starting with this mustard seed in the section I've already done, and then the very bottom, and then that'll give me the very top bit and then the bit in between to mix another colour. And so here I was going to use the purple, and that is the lilac shade, but I found that this was too light and I thought this is never going to mix in too well. So that was the shaded lilac, and then afterwards I decided to go in with the picked raspberry. And again, I just then mixed this in with that mustard seed colour, just to get that kind of gradient. The colours kind of went together okay, so I just kind of mixed it in all together. And I wasn't really too worried about what the final colour was like, because I'm just kind of experimenting a little bit here. But you can see that I'm just adding more ink, so I'm careful not to get any of the texture paste onto my ink pads. And the other thing you want to be really careful of is to make sure that you don't get any of the contaminated, so the inked texture paste mixture into your pot. So you want to make sure that either your spatula is clean when you go back in, or on occasions here I take a second spatula to get it out, and then I pop it onto my first one and make sure that I keep that one clean. So you want to make sure you don't get any of that colour into your texture paste. And I think that was such a lovely example of how to kind of create a little bit of something different, a little bit of two shades coming together, without just doing some regular ink blending. But I will go back at the end and show you all of the final results so you can get a closer look. So you can see that I'm using all different stencils and I'm trying out lots of different variations to see what gets the best results. So with this particular stencil, what I'm going to do is mix that texture paste with the Nuvo Shimmer Powder. So with this one, I'm going to be using the Meteorite Shower. So again, I'm just taking some of that texture paste and mixing some of that shimmer powder into it. And I think this works so beautifully. And what I'm trying to do here is not mix the colours in kind of too much. I'm more just going in an up and down motion because I want to keep those streaks of colour. So you can see that I'm adding more and more. And again, like I said, with using the inks, I'm hoping that when I get that normal texture paste, hopefully this week, this is just going to come out so much better. But what I tried to do here is not kind of mix it too much, and I didn't try to flatten out all of that texture paste across my stencil. So it ended up being quite thick, but I wanted to try and keep those streaks of the different kinds of colours. But again, you can see the overall colour is this really beautiful kind of bluey grey colour where it is mixing in, but you can just see some of those individual colours where I've tried not to over mix this. So you can see with this stencil, I did use that temporary stencil adhesive, and then just that centre bit was just a tad too sticky, so you just want to make sure that you don't use too much and that you peel it up really carefully. But you can see just kind of how thick that is in some areas. It's not totally flat, but it just gives it a little bit of texture, something a little bit more interest. And like I said, I wanted to keep all of those sort of beautiful little speckles of colour in there. So for this next one, again, a different stencil and one that I haven't used in the past. And what you can see on the left-hand side was the leftovers from another background that I created. So this is now just using everything that was left in the pot. I originally mixed this with that Atlantis burst, and then I'm coming in with my yellow shade. This is the Solar Flare, and again, I wanted to just highlight certain sections just with that colour. So what I tried to do with this stencil, because you've got that big open space in the middle, is I tried to just get the texture paste in the stencil, not in that centre bit. Of course, there was some areas where I just wasn't being careful enough, but I still had quite a lot of this texture paste left over. I wasn't really going to use it for anything else, so I just decided to fill in that middle section. And again, this just shows all of those little sections of colour that you get in the Atlantis burst colour, and then adding that Solar Flare as well. You just have those little highlights of colours, but this is a really beautiful kind of aqua teal style colour. So let me show you all of the backgrounds that I sat and created using these texture pastes, and then all those different mediums mixed in with it, and hopefully this is just going to inspire you just to have a go and get a little bit messy. So this was one that I didn't show you. This is with a mermaid style stencil, and I mixed this with a shade of purple from my Prism ink pads, and then also with that picked raspberry. And again, I tried not to kind of mix it in too much to get sort of those variations of colour that you could see. With this one here, you can see that it's got some black outline. I think this was just residue or leftover from the stencil, perhaps if I didn't clean it enough. But I actually really love that border around it, and I think it highlights that design really beautifully. I think it helps make it stand out more and gives it a little bit of a shadow around it. So this one here was just using the Atlantis Burst Shimmer Powder. So again, you can see that beautiful colour kind of mixed together really nicely to give something a little bit more muted. There wasn't too much colour kind of running through this. It mixed in quite well. That's why I used it a second time and added that solar flare. And this one here, you can see that it's got those little speckles of pink and purple and that really beautiful overall colour, being, I guess it's like a blue-grey, and I think it's really beautiful. And then of course that last one, you can see those little bits of solar flare in there and just spots of other colour making up that Atlantis burst. I really enjoyed sitting down and creating all of these backgrounds. Like I said in my previous video, I'm experiencing just a little bit of a creativity block at the moment, but this was brilliant just to sit down, switch off, get a little bit messy, and just create things and not really worry too much about what it actually looks like. But now I have a whole bunch of backgrounds here that I could use for cards and projects, and also it sort of opened up that world of using texture paste and how to make that product go just a little bit further. As I did mention, I have purchased the Tim Holtz texture paste because I did use up all of this product that I used in this video, so hopefully we can come back and just do this experiment again, maybe turn the backgrounds into cards, but I'm hoping to get much more sort of vivid results. So that's it for this video. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment down below. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do so you don't miss out on any future videos. Thanks very much for watching and happy crafting.